Hi, this is Amit Raj, and this is ACO in 2025.
Amit, what's your number one SEO tip for 2025?
It is the importance of relevance and depth when it comes to content and link building.
Superb. Okay, well, let's get some definitions for both of those terms. What is relevance?
So, when it comes to this is, two things, content and link building. I think relevance in terms of, one of the concepts that I've been, looking at recently is things like your serviceable available market, your serviceable obtainable market, but in relation to your keywords and content. And I think people have been touching on that more and more. So, rather than only focusing on what keywords or what content your competitors are targeting or going off vanity metrics like search volume or KD score, for instance, think about what content aligns with your audience. And it's not necessarily your competitors might not be targeting those keywords. So for me, that's like the relevance, but at the same time, that's depth, because you really have to think, in terms of what you should be targeting, what aligns with the audience you're trying to attract. And then for link building, again, same kind of thing. It's going for relevant links and thinking about the context of those links. What content is going to attract those kind of links? And if you reach out to people, what's going to get you the most relevant links? And when you're looking at that, that will dictate who you should be reaching out to, what content you should be pitching those publications. And naturally, you'll raise the bar on quality, just by extension on your link building efforts as well.
Brilliant. Okay, so much to chew over there in what you shared. You said KD score. I presume that meant keyword density.
Yeah, sorry, probably a couple of definitions. I'm thinking of keyword difficulty.
Difficulty, because density, that's been a while since I've heard that term.
Yeah.
So difficulty is relevant, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just I see a lot of people, going through, for instance, they'll analyze competitors, they'll cut out keywords based on something like a keyword difficulty score, but it's not really getting to the, like I saw a video recently, just as an aside, about content, the way that content is being targeted by, how people produce content when they're as part of their SEO strategy. And somebody he took on a client and he found that they were targeting a keyword like, what is a KPI? And it seemed like a good keyword to go for at the time by whoever suggested it. It had a big volume, a competitor was probably targeting it. But what he was trying to say was, is that actually your audience? Is there any value in targeting that and sinking all this effort into this huge piece about KPI and, and just regurgitating the same info as everybody else? And, and is that traffic going to turn into business, basically? That's the end goal.
Absolutely. At least try and actually cover as much as your closely matched keyword phrases initially before going for broader terms.
Exactly. And I think it's also just, again, we'll go into that later, but just, is it worth sinking that effort into that keyword? And it might be a broad term, but again, is it going to turn into relevant traffic? Is it going to turn into business and inquiries? And otherwise, you'd be better off focusing on something else.
Absolutely. And for that kind of landing page, you need to educate people about your brand, your products, your services, and just almost start the sales process instead of actually trying to capture people who are actively looking for something that you offer.
Exactly.
Another term that you used when describing what is relevance that I found interesting was available versus retainable market. So I like that. Could you maybe go into a little bit more depth about exactly what that means?
Yeah, so again, this is part of the anyone that's studied marketing, and they'll know more about this than me. But for instance, your TAM, SAM, and SOM. So I think in the context, you can apply that to your keyword targeting, and this will be, for instance, with your SAM, this will be the segment of your TAM that is your market with your current business model.
Total addressable market, serviceable addressable market, and serviceable obtainable market.
Exactly, yeah. So, and you can do that. You can analyze competitors. You can use certain tools to extract potential keywords you should be targeting. But, this is going to take some manual work. This is the unfortunate thing, in terms of determining which of those keywords should we be targeting. And again, you can use like a keyword clustering tool. There's a few out there that people might know of. You can input your keywords and it will cluster the keywords so that because some of those keywords could be targeted with the same piece of content, but at the same time, you need to cut out the stuff that isn't really your market, and you could extract competitors, and it is going to give you a lot of junk. Whenever you use an SEO tool, so it's then categorizing that into your SAM and your SOM. And with your SOM, I would define that, and I've seen people define this as something they can realistically get within the next 1 year or 1.5 years.
How do you know you can realistically get it?
You can, again, this is where metrics like keyword difficulty, come into it. It can be an indicator, or things like the link gap in comparison to the competitors that are competing for that keyword. But that is tied in with keyword difficulty scores anyway. They do factor that in. That can give you an indication, but you also tend to find that the extremely broad terms are generally speaking going to be some of the hardest terms. So, through that way, you would determine what you can realistically capture. But again, you can only go off estimations and things like keyword difficulty score and what aligns with your, I guess, with the topical authority, jumping on that bandwagon. But, that will also help determine what do you think you can actually capture and what is too broad.
It's challenging because, if you're comparing just numbers of links or quality of links versus you and competitors, the issue is that your site is going to have a different level of expertise for your chosen specialist subject versus your competitors. And if Google perceives you as being a greater expert, then the fact that you've got less links may not necessarily matter, I guess.
That's true, actually, and you might find by taking this approach, you can rank certain content without having to sink a lot of money into, trying to proactively acquire links. And also, if you can get the content right, and again, this comes down to the depth of the content and how you've researched it, and if you've added your own unique insights, you might rank that piece of content without, quicker than you'd expect. Yeah, I think, and again, a part of that is really you just want to align your keyword and your content targeting with what's going to lead to business. I think, and especially now, everyone is looking at their marketing budgets, and we know this, that's what's been happening, in recent years. People are tightening up marketing budgets, trying to see, what they can do with what they have, and I think that's part of it. You end up focusing on what matters or what you could realistically capture. To some extent, sometimes you could go for a hard keyword, and you might rank it quicker than you'd expect. But I think, just like I said, the example I said before about the what is a KPI topic, it's just one of those examples where I think in that situation, they just had to kind of sit back and kind of take a look and say, is this a good idea? Should we be putting effort into these kind of, content pieces or keywords,
Yeah, it made sense 15, 20 years ago when there was less competition.
That's right. Yeah.
So, you, in relation to relevance and depth, as well as link building, you also talk about content as well. So what trends are you seeing in terms of the type of content that's required in order to be appreciated by Google and users?
Yeah, the interesting thing, I think I saw a couple of studies about this recently, and obviously we all know about, AI, how AI is coming into the content game and the impact that's having. And it's not to say you can't use AI. It obviously does have its uses, but I think it's going to have to ultimately come down to the depth of the content. What is unique about it? What new info are you injecting into it? I even think things like trying to align it with, for instance, your social strategy. Can you include video content within the content? Can you visualize certain things? Do you have unique data or a study about that aspect of the topic that nobody else has? And again, this is something we should be doing anyway, because it's part of, we're creating content for the users. We want people to engage with the content, want them to spend time on it. And as we know from the algo leak that happened not long ago, although we can't infer too much from that, but obviously the Chrome user data, for instance, is being used in some way. And that goes, and I'll go into that a bit later, but it's not even just, I don't know if everyone realizes or if everyone's really kind of thought about that, but it's not just SEO traffic. In theory, if you were attracting traffic, whether it's directly or referral traffic or from socials, in effect, that's Chrome user data as well that would be engaging with that content. So it's part of the bigger picture.
Absolutely. I had a conversation with Joshua Squires about omni-channel marketing and the importance of SEOs being aware of different channels and where the customer is and influencing them and getting them to click through and hopefully positively impacting your SEO success from that.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. Anything like that you can bring into your content as well as the depth and you want it to basically don't just regurgitate everything that's out there. You need something kind of unique, something that's going to get people reading and engaging with it and linking to it or sharing with people, with other people on socials.
I'm starting to like this word depth in relation to describing decent content, because depth doesn't just mean quantity. It's not talking about number of words, is it? It's talking about different elements within that piece of content, be it quotes or tables or information or unique information. Is that a reasonable overview of what you mean by depth?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's as well as that, just when you're planning your content as well, like I said initially, there is depth to that because it's not as simple as, extracting a report from an SEO tool and dumping it on the writer's lap. It's unfortunately it's not going to be as easy as that. And at the same time, and when it comes to the research of that content and what information you're putting in or other elements you can add, yeah, it is definitely depth. Maybe you can't produce content as fast as you might think, but that, maybe you don't need to produce as much volume as you would need to really, again, ultimate goal is just aligning it with, is it going to lead to inquiries? Will it lead to revenue? Kind of just thinking about, those kind of things as well.
So where does relevance and depth fit into establishing an SEO strategy? I mean, is this something that you have to actively consider once a year in great depth? Sorry, the additional use of the word there, but or is this something that's is an ongoing thought process?
I think it's an ongoing thing. I think every element of your SEO strategy where you can, again, add more depth to the process, basically, no matter whether it's the planning stage. And the good thing is, I think a lot of writers would probably, if you've got a writing team, basically, I think this is probably what they're looking for, because we don't really want to be, regurgitating info that's already out there, taking stuff out of ChatGPT or, what's. And I think ultimately that's what now exactly how Google's exactly doing it. I don't know, but they are looking for fresh info, something different about the site. And I think these things that we saw in the algo leak is a bit of a clue as to what we should be doing in terms of how they use Chrome user data and how, again, how do other channels. Everyone's saying about omni-channel, you shouldn't just rely on traffic from Google. I think that's a good thing, but the synergy there, it is all part of a bigger picture that we need to be thinking about.
But how do you actually decide on which additional elements to incorporate in a piece of content? Because the challenge is you look at a SERP and you see successful pieces, you see what's ranking 1, 2, and 3 at the moment, and you can have a look at similarities and perhaps what Google are likely to be looking for. You don't necessarily want to stray too far away from a successful formula, but you want to make yours different. So how do you know which additional elements to add?
Yeah, that's different. I think it's knowing what you're good at and I guess what aligns with your brand. I think, and again, there's different ways of going about it. I think you can get inspiration from what's in the SERPs. I think looking at what's the top ranking results, but just because somebody is, let's say, quoting some experts and there's some quotes and like that's their thing, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it. Maybe you can run a study, or you just have like information or tips that nobody else has or a different viewpoint. So I don't think there's any one way of doing it, but like you said, you can take some inspiration what's in the SERPs, or even look at a different industry and a brand that's doing really well in the SERPs for them and kind of see, well, does that align? Is that something we can be doing and we can bring in that others aren't doing? But yes, I guess short answer to that is it depends. That's a favourite phrase.
That's a good way to take us to the last question, which is, if an SEO is struggling for time, what should they stop doing right now so they can spend more time doing what you suggest in 2025?
Yeah, I think a couple of things is when it comes to content, focus on the keywords that align with audience and channel alignment. I think is very important. So that's one of the things. And with link building, we know it's not a volume game anymore. I think it's a relevance game to some extent, and don't focus on arbitrary metrics like DA and things like that, because and it might save you budget in the long term.
Okay, so in terms of content, stop publishing content that doesn't actively align with your established audience.
Essentially, yeah, and same kind of thing with links. It's again, I think everyone's agreeing that you probably don't need as many links as you originally, as you thought you did. But at the same time, I think this is a good time to start thinking about how you're building links, how you're going to attract links, whether it's naturally, and even proactively building them. Where are you getting them from? What's the context of it? Does that align with audience? I think is definitely things to think about.
Amit Raj is founder at The Links Guy, and you can find him over at thelinksguy.com. Amit, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2025.
No problem. Thanks for having me, David.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2025, the book, over at SEOin2025.com.